everyone. Good morning to my co-panelists and the participants out there. As my friend from CSR Box has already mentioned, I'll be moderating this discussion, which is centered around ESG driving enterprise values, a boardroom perspective. Of late, as every one of us know, the investors have suddenly started to focus a lot on the non-financial value drivers also, that can affect the business's performance. I'm not too sure whether I'm right in saying that of late, but I think there has been some more attention in the recent past that I have noticed. The company's ESG performance, therefore, has become a sort of a tool, for the investors to drive their decisions. And because of that, it has become a very focused area as far as the company's boards are also concerned. So therefore, there is a lot of commitment that the companies are making towards the ESG, and they are very ambitious goals that they are, taking for themselves, and very proactively reporting also their actions and their achievements. If I speak of one of our own group companies where I work in the Dalmia Bharat Group, Dalmia Cement has actually set a narrative by committing to transition from gray to green. In fact, many of you would have noticed that we were the first cement company to have committed to manufacturing a carbon negative cement by 2040. We were also one of the earlier ones to join the leagues of RE100. Not just RE100, but also EP100 and EV100. In fact, on the water front too, Dalmia Cement is about 12.4 times water positive, which is kind of a leadership position that we have taken in this area. But interestingly, they are friends. Of course, they are friends from the NGO sectors also who've joined us as participants in this discussion. I think there is a huge opportunity that lies for the NGOs also to work together with corporates to help them, achieve their ESG goals and be, their partners in their journey towards their ESG goals. Some of the quick examples that I can take are perhaps, the supply of green fuels, that could be a good livelihood opportunity for the communities around the manufacturing facilities. Also in conservation of water. On the social front, when it is about engaging with the communities around the manufacturing locations and also, the other industry. I think there again, the NGOs can play an important role there. I think we'll get to hear more on this from my co-panelists today. As they've already been introduced by CSR Box, I'll not get into the introductions again, but we'll rather go straight to the discussions. To my co-panelists, what I propose is that we take about 8 to 10 minutes each during our initial round, and then perhaps leave or save about 10 to 15 minutes, if possible, for the Q&As that come to us from the audiences, right? And I'll try and indicate once the 8-10 minutes, once we're closer to those 8-10 minutes. Okay, so I begin with Rinika. Rinika, in fact, I have had the opportunity of being with you on several panels earlier also, and I really admire the work that you do at Apollo. But I don't know how many of us know that you also very often write on ESG, right? And I in fact recall one of your recent pieces, which perhaps you wrote about a year ago. I mean, you said, but I quote you, "Paying attention to ESG concerns doesn't compromise returns, rather the opposite." Would you please elaborate on this? Why do you think so? And what's been the Apollo's experience around this? Rinika, over to you.
Thank you, Vishal. Thank you, CSR, for giving Apollo an opportunity. And trust you to start with this, Vishal. Thank you so much. And I reciprocate. Likewise, it's been a great opportunity to be working with you and being, sharing the panel with you as well. A few times now. In terms of when I wrote this piece, it's actually a very credible point, and it's not on paper, but it's actually something we solely believe in, and as an organization as well. And I'll just give you a couple of anecdotes from the article, but I'll dovetail it in terms of what's happening at Apollo as well. I mean, we talk about responsible investing, and that's a term that's been going on, and you rightly said, it's not something that's recent. It's been coined a while ago, but recently with the focus of environment, social governance, these three indicators, they've gained a lot of center stage. Specifically with COP26, it's kind of accelerated. So when we talk about previous times, we're talking about people, planet, profit, and making sure that the three were in sync. Recently, it's kind of really accelerated, and I'll just give you in terms of what's happening. There is a changing trend, shift in stakeholders. You rightly spoke about the investors side of it. Now, when we look at the investors and the financial institutions, they're no longer looking at the overall returns. They're not looking at the corporate performance, but they actually see what's the strategy of the organization in terms of combating climate change. They're looking at what are your procedures and protocols in terms of the health and safety of your employees, and how you're taking your supply chains and making them more sustainable. So one of the things which I quoted in that article as well was that there has been, in the last few years, there's been a change in ESG investing, huge. And it's from like a 30 trillion US dollar to, in 2018, it's envisaged that it's going to grow multifold and it's going to cross 50 trillion in the next 2 decades. There's an interesting anecdote that I found and actually I read recently, which was there was a report by Ernst & Young, and actually interviewing their investors, and it said after the survey was done, nearly over 97% of the investors said that ESG really mattered to them, and they would actually look at investments through that lens and make a decision, which was 20% points higher than the previous year. So that itself tells you that there is a shift, and we see that the growing emphasis. The other side is just not the investors, but there are the other stakeholders, customers we look at. There is a change in their behavior patterns as well. Here again, there was something I was reading, there was an IBM report which said that 80% of your customers actually look at making a decision based on a sustainability of the organization, and 60% of them are actually willing to make a change in their consumption patterns. So these are really telling facts, and that's what you see, the changing trend in the textile industry overall as well, which is one of the largest, like transport industry, is one of the largest emitters. Over 10% of the emissions globally are through the textile industry, and you see there is a changing trend. You have these concepts of slow fashion, all of that, it's emerging slowly. So you see the changing trends, and not only limited to the customers, but now when you look at your supply chain, and here I can, specifically take an example of what's happening in the automobile industry, which is us, where for the big supplier, our supply chain partners, when we look at like the big BMWs or Mercedes, we as a partner to them, we have to align with their goals. They might have embarked on that journey earlier. We have to align to their goals of net zero and showcase our commitment so that we can at least apply for the RFQ process as well. So these are the trends that are changing, and that's something as an organization, Apollo has already made a commitment, which is aligned with the European Green Deal, where we've said that we will be net zero by 2050. And now we're working for our short-term targets overall in terms of 2026, what does it look like, 2030, what does it look like, and not just seeing emissions, which is through our manufacturing, but scope 3 as well, which is outside of it. So that's something we're looking at it, because you just cannot have a silo approach of seeing what your manufacturing is causing, but also outside of that. So whilst I'm talking about, the overall changing trends, what's happening, there is a global growth in sustainable investment, and it is a snowball effect, because what you look at, I mentioned about the COP26, which is actually accentuated this even more. What's going to happen is where the countries now have gone back and they have their own NDCs where they say that they will revise, and then they have to make a commitment, because we have to contain global temperatures to 1.5 degrees. Otherwise, we won't have a world to live in. That's what the IPCC report and everything is revealing. Where does it come? It comes down to the industry. when it comes down to the industry, what does the industry do? Of course, I mean, in India, when you look at it, we're a little, I mean, I think in terms of the legislation wise, we're a little ahead. We have the CSR law, which is the first, from our country, which was introduced. We look at the business responsibility report, which was a part of the annual report, which has helped companies to kind of talk it through and disclose their disclosures in public space. So that's kind of helped. But now we're moving to this new thing, legislation, which is about business responsibility sustainability reporting, which is nothing but which will give investors an indicator checklist of ESG, so that they can actually evaluate. So as a country, we're already progressing towards that. So it helps the organization. If you've already embarked on this journey, it helps. So that's one of the things what we've started to look at Apollo, where our own sustainability report, it resonates ESG already, because it will help us to overcome this, which is going to be a legislation sometime sooner. The other thing, of course, I mentioned about the stakeholders changing trends, which is one of the other influencing factors. The one thing which I wanted to highlight over here is because it brings ingenuity in terms of when you're exploring solutions. And here I have a specific example. I have two, but I think in the interest of time, I just take one. Extended producer responsibility is a legislation that's going to come up in coming years in India, and it's at a very recent stage. We all are aware of it. And we also know that tires, the unmindful disposal of tires is a huge concern, environmental burden. So as an organization, we know that it's coming through. It's at a nascent stage in India. We've already been working on this, where we have a two-pronged approach, where we're looking at, one, of course, we've invested huge amount of time and investment in terms of looking at the rubber crumbs, how, we've commissioned research in terms of the safety aspects of the rubber crumb. The other side is, from that research, we've actually had certain projects which we have started to develop and implement in our social space, where we're developing pitches for playground spaces, for utilizing that end-of-life tires, rubber crumb. So these are the things that we're already working on. And then the only thing is, when I said that paying attention does not compromise return, is actually making you, taking you ahead of the game, and it's actually preparing you to help you as an organization to overcome certain things which are imminent in the future, and that's good, they're going to be coming forward. So that's the reason I wrote that, and that's the overall stuff. I thought I did just kind of highlight to yourself why I wrote that and what's happening in the space of ESG at the moment. And I'm sure Sagarika and other members would have a lot more to contribute, so I just kind of leave it over there. Thanks, Vishal. Vishal, I can't hear you. You're on mute.
Sorry for that, Arenika. Yes, I'm sure Sagarika and Soumya and Bala would also throw some more light on this. I was very inclined to ask you a follow-up question, but I'll park that for a while in the time. So if time permits, I'll come back to you. But in the meanwhile, let me go to Bala Kumar. Bala, like many other companies, you've also published your net zero goals. And according to that, what I was reading, that you would reduce your emissions by 50% by 2030, and then by about 90% by 2040. Two related questions. One, of course, is more from the comparative point of view. When you compare an IT industry with a manufacturing industry, or the so-called hard to abate industry. I mean, do you think it is a sort of a low-hanging fruit for an IT company to achieve the net zero? And then, largely, what's your strategy to achieve this? I look forward to hear to that. Bala.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vishal, and thanks CSR Box. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for this opportunity. It's a very interesting panel to start with, because ESG is the buzzword right now everywhere. Like Mr. Vishal said, probably we are catching up compared to the Western countries and European countries, where the ESG reporting and publishing has been there for years now. We are also catching up in Cognizant. We published our first ESG report this May 2021, and it was a very interesting experience all through. To your question, Mr. Vishal, specifically, right? Is it a low-hanging fruit for the ITA and ITES industry compared to a manufacturing industry? Yes, it might look like a low-hanging fruit, but still the challenges are same. The institutional investors like Vanguard, BlackRock are pushing every company to have a net zero goal, have all the ESG factors considered into an organization, and customers, like Renika said, right? Customers to submit an RFP and RFQ, customers are expecting that are you in alignment? So the challenges are the same. Probably it's like same food served in a different plate, right? So that's how I would see this as. The same supply chain issues are there, like Cognizant has a lot of supply chain across the globe. So how do we manage, how do we transform them to align with our net zero goal? So it's definitely the challenges are same, but the intensity might vary. That's my response to your first question. And the second question is about yes, we're happy. We in alignment to the global standards. We have also published our net zero goal recently, and we have taken 3 to 4 pronged approach to achieve our net zero goal. One is to aligning to the climate science, the SBTi initiative, Science Based Target Initiative. We are trying to develop a science-based emission reduction target so that like we can keep our global average temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius. So we are also looking at doing the third-party validation with SBTi, so that we are in alignment with the global ambition and legitimacy. That's the first thing, where we wanted to align to the global SBTi initiative. And second one is to invest more into our renewable energy. Based on our initial success in India, with over a quarter of Cognizant's energy has come from renewable sources in 2020. In India specifically, we plan to expand the use of on-site solar energy and enter into new power purchase agreements across the globe. And we also continue to be a member of the Renewable Energy Buyers Alliance, REBA, and we wanted to go to a place where we can procure 100% renewable electricity. That's one of our roadmap that's there to achieve our net zero goal. And the other thing, the third one, is about increasing the energy efficiency. In the past couple of years, 2019, 2020, specifically in Cognizant offices in India, we have done a lot of modifications. We have improved our energy efficiency across several offices in India, replacing our outdated like conventional power supply systems and modular systems by upgrading our LED fittings. And we are trying to bring in IoT into place, where we can also optimize the energy utilization across the office. These are some of the things that we are looking at. So three-pronged approach. One is aligning to climate science, second is investments in renewable energy, and third one in increasing in energy efficiency. And to amplify our progress, to align with the global standards and accelerate our progress in achieving this net zero goal, we have signed up with the Climate Pledge, an Amazon initiative, and we have also signed up with Science-Based Target Initiative's Business Ambition 1.5 Pledge, and we have signed up with United Nations Global Compact India chapter, and we are submitting our communication of progress with United Nations Global Compact. We are trying to really accelerate our progress so that we could achieve our goals by 2030 and 2040 as published. So that's the strategy that we have in terms of achieving a net zero goal. Vishal, if I may, I think I have answered your question for now. Any further questions, yes, I'll be happy to take it up.
No, thank you so much. In fact, that was very interesting to know. In fact, you mentioned of net zero waste 30, right? So I think there's an e-learning program also that you have kind of created around that. So Bala, can you quickly tell us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's an interesting initiative. So when we were looking at, all of us right across the globe, while there is a investors push and customers push and the complaints coming in from other aspects also, and UN is trying to push through SDGs and SDG indexes across the globe, across the districts and across the states, everywhere that's coming in. I think we strongly believe that it's everybody's responsibility also. It is not only corporate and agencies in responsibility. It's every individual. The change should, like Mahatma Gandhi says, like be the change that you wish to see, right? So how can we bring in the change within every individual? How can we bring in the change within our employees? So we have a 318,000 employee count in Cognizant across the globe. It's 318,000 head count. So how can we bring in a cultural change or a behavioral change within everybody within our Cognizant community to bring in change? So we have a program called Cognizant Outreach, which is our employee volunteering program, and we try to bring in employee volunteering opportunities across the globe for associates. So pretty much we focus on two areas where we can bring in social impact. One is around supporting inclusion in tech, where we take up actions around education, STEM education in school, and training students, providing scholarship for students for their higher education. And we also continue to mentor and train and skill development for students. And we are actually looking at hiring the students from underserved community as well. So that's one of our focus area, where by supporting inclusion in tech, how can we transform the underserved segment and have them into our Cognizant family also. So that's one of the first focus area through our employee volunteering program. Second is accelerating our community impact. So as part of our community impact, we do a program by digitally empowering the charities across the globe. So how can charities improve their operational efficiency by giving technical training, by giving skill development program for the charity and the staff? And we also, as part of environmental initiative through employee volunteering, that's where this net zero 30 program comes in. I mean, zero waste in 30 program comes into place. So we want to bring in a behavioral change or we are trying to do a lot of trainings, fellowship programs for our employees within Cognizant, so that they can really transform their lifestyles into low carbon lifestyle. So this World 8th Day, April 22nd, 2021, our CEO Brian Humphreys announced two goals, visionary goals towards our environmental consciousness. One is to announce an e-learning program for our associates across the globe, wherein they can take up the course and they can adopt a low carbon lifestyle. And second is that to donate 80,000 devices by end of year 2022. Both of these goals are very interesting, very unique for us. And Zero Waste 30 is a unique e-learning platform that we have launched within our Cognizant associates. We join hand with Bare Necessities, a social enterprise based out of Bangalore. So it's a program that enables, it's like a 6 hours of e-learning program, a lot of do-it-yourself activities, and end of the program, everybody who takes up the course in 30 days, they can adopt a low carbon lifestyle or a zero waste lifestyle. So as we speak today, it's been like 3 months since we launched, and 28,000 employees have completed that course. And we're hearing heartwarming experiences. People have started making their organic toothpaste, organic soaps, and avoiding plastic. A lot of heartwarming stories are being shared, and it's every bit, right? Every drop counts in this overall environmental battle or climate battle that we are all fighting towards. So every bit that we can really contribute is something that we are trying to do. And we are partnering with United Nations to launch a further program where everybody can use through a mobile app, everybody can measure their carbon emissions, and then how can they really help in reducing the carbon emissions. That's the second phase that's coming in 2022. And in terms of 80,000 waste donations commitment, we have donated 48,000 desktops in India post-pandemic to educational institutions across India, with support from variety of partners across India. So by extending the lifespan of these desktops, right, eventually we are reducing the carbon emissions by not producing new devices. So these are some of our commitments through our employee volunteering program and through our CSR that we are contributing towards the globe and climate action. So once again, thank you so much for the opportunity, Mr. Vishal.
Thank you, Bala. Very interesting. I think it's very interesting case wherein you have linked your volunteering to one of your own ESG goals also. I think that's something really interesting. And so moving on, before I go to Soumya, I think just one word to the participants, the other participants also. If you have any questions for any of the panelists, you can put that up in the Q&A box, Q&A section, and I'll take that up later with the panelists. So coming to you, Soumya, like Renika, I have also had the opportunity of knowing your work for quite a while. And for me, as of now, in your current role, you are in a way on the other side of the table, right? So you work with a venture capital company, and so just was curious to know, Soumya, that how do you incorporate the ESG in the companies you invest in? How do you assess that, and what sort of push is required at the boardroom level to make that happen? Why don't you help us with that, Soumya?
Thank you so much, Vishal. It's a pleasure to be part of this panel. I'm really excited. ESG, like Bala mentioned, Renika mentioned, such a hot topic right now. So I'm very glad to be part of this panel. I'll start broad by giving a more macro picture. So Avishkar has been working in the impact investing space for the last 2 decades now. So even before the term impact investing was coined. So we are in some sense a pioneer impact fund manager that invests in companies that create positive economic, environmental, or social outcomes. And these businesses sometimes are referred to as social enterprises or impact businesses. So what does this all mean? Impact, investing, all of that. This means Avishkar invests in entrepreneurs to help build businesses to solve a very large, complex social problem, say in a low-income state of India, such as Odisha, Jharkhand, or Bihar, to create jobs and livelihoods where people live, reducing their risks and vulnerabilities through access to affordable products and services in some of the most difficult geographies or underdeveloped geographies that have broken ecosystems. For us, therefore, investing in impact entrepreneurs with, say, high-risk capital and building ecosystems would result in impact and returns, which are primarily the outcomes. So as responsible investors, right, we also believe that strong ESG processes are required that the company needs to follow. Excuse me. That the companies need to follow in order to sort of create a better or higher positive impact in return. So to answer your question, Vishal, ESG is integrated with our investment process and how we evaluate deals. In fact, at Avishkar, we've been integrating ESG assessments as early as 2013 to sort of enhance business operations. And because we understand that it's not just enough to do good business, right, that have good intentions. You also need to have adequate processes, systems in place that can strengthen the business as it expands. And therefore, becomes very important how our investee companies conduct their business. So one of the things that's really worked very well for us is bringing an alignment on what ESG means. Because it can be interpreted in different ways in different contexts. Ultimately, it is about improving the business process and systems, but it's also important to understand how it can create value for the companies, right? So speaking the same language here is important. Understanding business challenges is important while you're implementing them. Finding solutions is very important. And this is not just to mitigate the risk, but also to identify what are the ESG opportunities. And this has to be done over a period of time as the business evolves. And at the same time, we are also very cautious not to burden our investee companies with ESG actions and processes. We want to be catalysts. We want to strengthen the business practices of our investee companies. So ultimately, while they're achieving impact and returns, they're also doing or creating value for the community they're engaged in or the business itself. So, and in the present context, Vishal, COVID has changed our priorities, right? That's very obvious. It is clearer than ever that climate change can wipe out all the development work we've done so far with just a flood or a cyclone. We can create businesses in, say, Jharkhand, Odisha, but with a flood, everything can be wiped out. On the other hand, we have a new set of customers, Gen Z, millennials, that are brand conscious and want to associate with good business, not just as customers, but even as employees, right? So for us, therefore, as responsible investors, ESG becomes very intrinsic to how we make investments. And therefore, like I said, need to speak the same language, have our priority right on what we want to achieve together with the entrepreneurs. And this will again depend on what stage we are investing in the company. So an early stage company could have different priorities compared to a growth stage enterprise that we are investing in, right? Most importantly, we see ESG creating value for our enterprises, say in the form of attracting large mainstream investors and responsible investors. In fact, you would have heard of Tata Soulful, which is a millet-based company. Avishkar was the first institutional investor in Kotaram, which works under the name Soulful brand. Recently, Tata took over or bought our entire stake in Soulful. And Tata is known for its responsible, being a responsible player, right? And again, 5 out of our 61 investments in India have, we've been able to pave way for their IPO. So 3 are already listed, 2 are in the process. So ESG has therefore created a lot of value. So over to you, Vishal. I hope this answers your question.
Okay, Soumya, thank you so much. I didn't realize that you stopped there. But since you've not taken much of your time, I have another question for you. Soumya, you've been watching this CSR space also for quite a while now, and you know that we have this mandatory CSR in India. And I'm particularly asking you this, because we have so many friends from the NGO sector also here listening to you. Do you think that this mandatory CSR in India, it feeds into the larger ESG actions and reporting in India? Soumya?
Thank you. That's a great question, Vishal. I'll try to answer it in 2 parts and the way I see it. So ESG, in some sense, to me, is an extension of CSR. So organizations, like we've spoken about, can no longer have a business where the operations are creating negative impact, social and environmental impact, or badly governed for that matter. On the other hand, use CSR or philanthropic activities as a tool to do good, right? That benefit the community. Therefore, CSR and ESG need to sort of feed into each other in order to create that strong business that create social and environmental value. And it has to be both inward looking, how business operations are run, and external facing, right? In terms of making philanthropic investments in causes that benefit, say, a larger stakeholder or community. Second, the way I see a CSR, which is more broadly also includes sustainability initiatives and D&I initiatives, support ESG actions like Renika mentioned earlier, right? You have the new reporting, business reporting, responsible reporting that quantifies some of these aspects, ESG aspects. So in terms of, taking stakeholder considerations into account, building businesses with diverse and inclusive teams, better engaged employees, or even, sort of creating that sustainable supply chains, or reducing, say, the environmental impact. So all this sort of, the CSR activities sort of supports your ESG actions as well. And for both to work, of course, it requires, like, say, a top-down approach where your board, your shareholders, your employees, business operations need to be aligned and connected. And I think that most importantly, both are quantifiable right now. And this is something I think Dr. Preeti Adani also alluded to in her speech earlier. This tied in with SDGs can become very powerful. So because it gives a sense of direction, right? So yeah, to answer your question, yes, this is how it will feed into it.
Great. Thank you so much, Soumya. And let me now go to Sagarika. Sagarika, sorry for coming last to you, but I think we're very keenly looking forward to hear from one of the old business conglomerates in India. And since Godrej is such an old company, I'm sure somewhere you would have also a very strong root, have strong roots into the notion of trusteeship. I'm saying this because I also come from a business house which is pretty old, and I know the strong sense of trusteeship that I have felt around me in the organization. In that context, what's Godrej way of ESG, Sagarika? Help us understand that.
Thank you very much, Vishal, and good morning to everyone, and hope everyone is staying well and safe, especially with this new variant about, and which we don't know very much about. So let's stay safe. Let me first begin by thanking CSR Box for inviting me to this panel. I've already learned a lot about what my co-panelists and their companies and agencies are doing. I'm looking forward to interacting with the audience as well. And Vishal, to your point about Godrej being an old company, we actually call ourselves 125 years young. So we have a lot more a long journey to kind of go ahead as well. You're very right. I mean, sustainability has been core to who we are in Godrej. I mean, this is something that it's critical to our strategy, and sort of placing people and profits first is how we sort of define our one of our core values, trust. This is how we define it. Let me give you a few examples of this. I mean, I think one of the earliest examples would be when we first started manufacturing soap, which was actually during the last pandemic, the Spanish flu in 1918. When we started making soaps, we were one of the first companies in the world to make soap out of vegetable oils instead of animal fat. Beyond that, I think the fact that 23% of our promoter holdings are actually held in trust, which invest in education, health, environment, and so on. Further, many of you, especially those of you who are from Mumbai, would be aware that we have a large land holding, which is the Vikhroli mangroves. And this too is held in trust. In fact, while the trust was created in 1985, the focus on conservation of the mangroves began as early as when the land was acquired, which was way back in the 1940s. So this notion of trusteeship that you mentioned is very much a part of how we and relate to and interact with the world around us. That what we hold today is basically, it's not ours, held in trust for future generations. And this sort of is further distilled today into what we believe is the business purpose for each of our group companies. So this is, it kind of bleeds into our culture, our values, the brands that we are creating and the brand purposes. And that way is embedded across the business itself. It's not something that we sort of began to work on now or in the last couple of years, which is when the term ESG has been coming about. I think we've at Godrej, I think I'm very proud to say that this is something that has been an evolving space, and we've sort of kept pace with the developments that have been all sort of first, this notion of trusteeship to giving back to society to the environment, the Millennium Development Goals to SDGs. In fact, back in 2010, we embedded sustainability and CSR into our business strategy. Itself, and this really helped us over the last decade to ensure that we looked inwards at our operations and processes, outwards at our ecosystem, our supply chain, and the communities that we worked in and with. We had ambitious goals for even that time. Basically to look at training 1 million people with skills that would empower them and increase their sort of livelihood. On green, we had, what's at that point was a fairly ambitious targets about being carbon neutral, water positive, sending zero waste to landfill, and to reduce our fossil fuel consumption and increase renewable energy portfolio. All of this by 2020. And we've made pretty good progress on all of these. We've not met all of them. I mean, as you can imagine, We are, after all, a group that is primarily manufacturing heavy, and therefore, reaching carbon neutrality is very, it is difficult, but we've got there. At Godrej Consumer Products, for example, today we source 30% of all our energy from renewables. We've reduced our emissions by almost half from 2010. We recharge 3 times the water that we consume, and we send zero waste to landfill. And what our aim is that by 2025, we'll be Scope 1 and Scope 2 carbon neutral. And we're working on our science-based targets as we speak, which we will also publish in the next few months. What we've sort of realized is that what has worked for us has been the fact that we've adapted. Like I mentioned earlier, we've adapted to change, and we've adapted to the growing expectations of stakeholders, which my co-panelists have also mentioned. And we've put in place goals, because unless you put goals, measurable targets, you're not going to be able to understand what progress you're making or not. We've collected data along the way, and what has worked, I think, for us really well is that we've communicated. We've communicated internally, we've communicated externally. So where we've not been able to meet targets, for example, the target of skilling 1 million young people by 2020, we didn't meet that, but we've put that out publicly on our website that this is what didn't happen, and this is why it didn't happen, what we've learned along the way. I think that transparency is very important, because it is, after all, I think the one, let me say, the underlying foundational value behind ESG is really intent. How can you communicate your intent towards the ecosystem that you exist in as transparently as possible? That is where, that is the expectation from all stakeholders. And that is what, if we do it with genuine intent, we are going to be able to, deal with a lot of the otherwise, greenwashing type perceptions that communities, civil society, and so on have about corporates. So that's broadly what we've done. But we know that what we've done so far is while it may be good for us, it's not enough for the planet by any means. We have to do more. We have to put in place more ambitious goals, and do more in the coming decades. So I'll pause there.
Very interesting, very interesting. Just curious to know, Sagarika, how do you drive ESG at Godrej? Very quickly, if you could tell us, is it an exclusive team that drives it, or is it a multifunctional team that comes together and drives this?
I think what worked for us was that, of course, we had, not just the promoters and the management behind us. We actually as far as both environment and the CSR projects in the last decade went, we kind of cascaded it down to middle management and down to the shop floor and the manufacturing floor. Much like what Bala talked about in Cognizant, we have integrated employee volunteering as well into the overall vision for CSR and sustainability. Going forward, actually, we've also set up a committee at the board level, which will be looking at ESG overall, and ensure that again, senior management, KRAs, performance pay, etc., are also linked to the kind of performance we are able to demonstrate to our stakeholders.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And I think we started a bit late, but we seem to be on track. And I think I still have a couple of minutes to go back to Rinika. Rinika, the thing that I wanted to understand from you was that in this amazing ESG journey that Apollo Tyres is going through, how do you engage with NGOs in that? What role do they play in your ESG journey?
So so in terms of course, when we're looking at Apollo Tyres, we engage with NGOs based on so our entire CSR program, so to speak, we have core areas identified based on a stakeholder mapping. And we have identified those core areas based on SDGs and the national agenda of the government as well. So that kind of mapping is already done, and we've already have 4 core areas. With regards that, the next stage for us is to look at the NGOs at the grassroots level who are working in that space, or sometimes we implement on our own as well, because I also head the foundation for Apollo Tyres. So we have a criteria checklist in terms of, we see how the organizations, because there are currently the CSR Act talks about various kind of protocols and processes to be in place for us to engage with NGOs. So once that's kind of goes forward, it's passed, then the way we work around is, because we have like a 6 months to 1 year entire range where once we have an NGO, which is a local NGO, because they have the best connect. Once we get them on board, there is a learning program that we actually embark with them on, where we define what exactly are the ESG indicators for us. And we make sure that they actually are, they are aligned with us. In fact, the Apollo Tyres Foundation offices are also, we've got them certified based on various ISO standard parameters. So once the NGO partners are on board, there is a huge amount of learning and development that we actually provide them with. The one thing it's there is because with our areas, it's very, very focused. We extremely emphasize on partnership model, which is the SDG 17 that talks about. So whilst we're talking about getting NGOs on board, we also look for corporates to come on board who have a similar vision. And therefore we can actually cascade it to a larger audience and can have more meaningful impact rather than just working in silos. So that's the overall stuff. Overall, I would just say that in terms of the NGOs coming on board, we have like a robust monitoring model. We have an audit protocol as well. But it's not just about imposing it, it's actually about cross-learning from them. Sometimes the NGOs are way ahead in their learning journey. So it's also that we see what exactly do we have to learn from them, because sometimes the foundation, which is the Apollo Tyres Foundation, might not have that kind of protocol in place, even though we've been in existence since 2008. So it's more of a cross-learning side of it. That's, I just kind of highlight that, but the entire NGO process where, kind of moving with them, it's not just about management of fund, it's actually management of a program which leads to a more larger impact. That's the driving force behind us, behind the entire core areas of CSR. So that's how we work. So we have that's how we work in parallel with them. So that we just call them implementing partners, or not just the NGO who's going to implement on behalf of us. There are partners for us.
Thank you, Rinika. Thank you. In fact, there was a similar question from one of the participants, Kushal. Not exactly this thing. I mean, he was specific about engagement with the corporates in the area of sports, but I think to a certain extent, Rinika, you've answered this by defining the process that you adopt in engaging with the NGOs. And thank you, Soumya. I saw you also responding to some of these queries, so I think that saves me some time. There's another question from Amit, which perhaps.
Vishal, Bala here. If I may add a point.
Yes,
here,
Bala,
right?
please.
If I can take like a few seconds. Yeah, I'll try to keep it less than a minute, right? So I think the charities and NGOs across the globe, across India, have a greater role to play in supporting and in enhancing the ESG goals of all the corporates. So CSR is not a separate entity, and ESG is not a separate entity. CSR is an inclusive part of ESG. So E focuses on environment actions in terms of the risks on climate and how are we a responsible organization towards our carbon emission, carbon accounting, all of it. Yes, talks about the learning and development of our employees and diversity and inclusion, giving back to community, and supply chain management, and health and safety of employees. All of it comes under ES. So giving back to community is nothing but the CSR. Pretty much we attribute to in India, right? So CSR and charities play a major role in making an organization best in class in the S category of ESG. So governance talks about the data security, process, audits, and governance on, and all those aspects comes into governance. So specifically, charities and NGOs have to start looking to the ESG goals of the larger organizations, corporates. What are their policies? What are the charter? So explore what particularly Dalmia Group does, what particularly Cognizant does, what particularly Godrej does. So go explore what are their charter. Go to Ministry of Corporate Affairs. It's public, like what every corporate has committed for this year. What is their 2% budget? Explore them and then approach. I know there is no straightforward approach, but you'll have to do some research. But there are organizations who give straightforward contact number and details as well. But understand what the corporate is looking forward, what is their charter, what is their focus area, and how they want to achieve their goals. And if you go in alignment, I think that's where the partnership evolves. That's the point that I wanted to leave with, Mr. Shah. Thank you so much.
Yes. Very valid point, Bala. Thank you so much for coming in. So I think we don't have the time to now go to the Q&As. There are a couple of questions that I noticed in that section. So perhaps CSR box can through mail direct that to any one of us, and we can respond to that. But for now, thank you so much, my co-panelists. I think it was a very engaging discussion. You have shared your own perspective, your own experiences with all of us. And I think, since this came from a very wide range of sectors, IT, manufacturing, consumer goods, venture capital. But one thing I find common in all of this is a very strong commitment that I can see. And, just borrowing from Sagarika, it's not the time for us to have realistic goals anymore. It's the time only for us to have ambitious goals. I think every corporate, every NGO, a government, everyone seems to be working on that philosophy now. And I have no doubt that, with the commitment of the corporates, NGOs, and the government, we can certainly achieve our ambitious goals sooner than later. So thank you so much, everyone. And